All right, it's 4 p.m. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. And to make a request specific to this meeting, please contact pec@london.ca. First, I'll ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. There being none, we will move on to the consent items, and we are going to poll. I've been advised that Councillor Hopkins would like 2.1 and 2.2 polled. Are there any other items to be polled from the agenda? All right, we'll get a mover and seconder for the balance of the items and then comments. Moved by Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Lehman. Comments, please, on any agenda items. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have two items that I'd like to comment on. I'll start with the more direct one, which is 2.9, 355 Marconi Boulevard, the Marconi Court subdivision. It's nice to see infill happening in Ward 2. This is a piece of land that is now going to create some residential homes in the area. But through you to our staff, I wanted to ask the one question that the neighborhood has had was around creating a pedestrian walkway access between this court and Clark Road. And so I wonder if staff could just comment briefly if any discussions or options were looked at there. I know it's not in the plans, so I just want to make sure that it was looked into.
Thank you. Staff, someone to answer that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Bruce Page, Manager for Subdivisions. Yes, we did look into it through the subdivision process and through Parks Planning. There was a couple of factors that came into play that were a little bit challenging. One was the intervening land, the Marconi land. It would have been separated if we provided that access through there. If we moved the access to the south, it would have made for a unsafe situation. So from a SEPTED perspective, we are looking for straight linear lines. This would have had to have a bit of a bend into it, so it wouldn't have been a safe location for an access. And then the third, we'd have to provide lighting. It was street to street lighting. So we did look into it quite a bit. The property to the south is the U-Haul. So it didn't create for an ideal or enjoyable connection there either.
Councillor, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for that. I just wanted to ensure that it was looked into, and certainly when we've got situations where it's going to create an unsafe access point, then that's not desirable either. So I appreciate staff doing their best there. And the good news is ultimately at the end of the day, we're getting more residential units in the neighborhood, so that's great. The other item that I wanted to just comment briefly on was 2.4. That's the draft Argyle Core Area Community Improvement Plan. There has been lots of input from my ward into the development of this CIP. I want to particularly take an opportunity to thank Isaac DeCuster from our staff, who's put in countless hours, not just with myself, but with the BIA, the Community Association, and other stakeholders in the neighborhood. I'm really excited to see this coming forward. Long before I arrived in these chambers, I played a small role in the formation of what was then just the business association, providing some backroom board meeting space at the MP's office for some business owners to meet. And I remember multiple times a discussion being had about a community improvement plan for the Dundas corridor. And we were told over and over again, it'll never happen, it'll never happen. Well, here it is. And this is the draft for circulation. So we'll get a little more public input on this before we finalize it and bring it back. But I'm really excited that this is finally happening. It's really good news for the Argyle area. And I just really appreciate all the work that planning staff has put into helping pull this together.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Hillier now.
Thank you very much. I'm just excited about 2.6, and I'd like to thank Mr. Mottram and Mr. Barrett for the wonderful work they've done putting through these special provisions for the Summerside subdivision. When I look out my back door, I can actually see the tractors at 7 o'clock in the morning every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Brief as always. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple comments, just following up with Councillor Hillier's comments about subdivisions. I want to thank staff for all the work that's going on with a number of consent items, all dealing with subdivisions. And I counted over 700 single family units and over 10 family units as well. So we're in the hundreds here, if not thousands of subdivisions going forward, and much needed housing in our city. So thank you to staff for all the hard work. I would like to make a quick comment on 2.5, which is encouraging the growing of food in urban areas. I know we're going out for review and public participation, but following the pandemic and the, if anything, the need for our food in an urban setting has really become great interest in the community. So I'm looking forward to that public consultation with eventually changes to the London plan. So with that, I just wanted to also make a comment. I'm getting into taking care of bees as well. It is a conversation that we're starting to have a broader understanding about a food source and the sustainability of our land in the urban setting. So I'm really excited to learning more and seeing the public come forward with their interest in this as well. So thank you.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a question regarding 2.7, the Vista Woods subdivision on Fanshawe Park Road West. What caught my eye was in the special provisions number 26, the owner shall construct noise walls along Wonderland Road as per the accepted engineering drawings, all to the specifications of the city and at no cost to the city. Through you, Chair, to staff, the specifications of the city specify the type of materials that are to be used in the noise walls?
Staff, go ahead.
Thank you, and through the chair, it's Matt Felberg speaking. Yes, we would identify the materials and we'd work through that on the engineering drawings.
Go ahead, Councillor.
And can I ask what materials they are?
Go ahead.
Thank you, and through the chair, my assumption at this point, without having the drawings in front of me, is that they'd be a concrete noise wall of some kind, probably a panel, pre-poured panel that is mounted and put up along the edge of the road.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to hear that because in my ward along Oxford Street, most of the noise walls there are of similar construction. However, there's a number of sections that were wood, and 20 plus years later, that wood is starting to move with the earth and get shabby, and maintenance is required, and homeowners are under the assumption that it's city responsibility and city-owned walls. So I'm glad to hear that there's something more permanent along the lines of what else I've seen along Fanshawe. Anyway, I think that's something that we should just be aware of because 20 years later, it'll be a problem that comes home to roost. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other comments on any of the items? All right. Oh, sorry. Councillor Van Holst, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just follow up with Councillor Hopkins' comments about the urban food strategy. I think it's great we're looking at that. There's a lot more attention being placed on food security, and even some of the LCRM funding is going to look into that. An important thing. And I believe that the councillor also pulled 2.3. Would you just confirm that for me?
No.
No, okay, okay. So I had a comment.
Go ahead and make your comments then.
Okay, thank you very much. So with regard to the facade improvements, the the limit that staffing is looking at is if 90% of the buildings look fine, then that's when the program would be removed. I think that's a little too low. I think I would prefer that be a 95%. 1 in 10 buildings looking a little shoddy is not what we want to see on, certainly on the gateway that's Hamilton Road. So we're attempting to fix those things up. I would like to have that program in place until we're happy with how things look. Not just reaching some arbitrary number. So that would be my comment on there. And perhaps through you, maybe staff has.
I'll let staff comment on that, Councillor. Go ahead, staff, if you'd like to comment on that.
Through the chair, thank you. Thank you for your comment. It will be taken into consideration. At this moment, we are looking for feedback on the recommended targets and measures, and also the measure of 90% wasn't to, after 90% of the buildings look good by our measure, it would only be a recommended possible scale back of the program and not a full removal.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I guess perhaps I misread that. I thought at 70% it was a scale back, and at 90% it was the removal. The other thing I think I would like to see, certainly in Hamilton Road, there is that there's a limit or restrictions on what can be used for a facade improvement. And what I found is that using stucco-like treatments, I don't know if it's stucco, but that kind of treatment, we've said we would not support. However, that's what the beer store has. It's what a number of the buildings already had, and because of cost, that seems to be the ones that are going in anyway. And so I think that's something I would like to see supported in the future. Perhaps I'll come with some kind of a motion for that. But I am pleased that we are seeing some changes and some upgrades to this gateway. And I appreciate that this program is in place. And it's certainly appreciated by those who are taking advantage of it. The most recent one is an old building that's being redone and made into a little grocery store, which also solves the problem of this area being somewhat of a food desert. And I don't think without these incentive programs, we would have been able to refurbish that building, because it had been damaged so much by people tearing out copper and plumbing and things like that. So these are great things, and I hope we keep them in place until we see the kind of results that we're thrilled with. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. So if there's no other comments, I'm going to call all the items except 2.1 and 2.2 for a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries.
There is item to be Rethink zoning. Councillor Hopkins, I think you wanted that matter called.
Yes, I am wondering if there is a very short presentation from staff to give us an update on the Rethink zoning process.
I think that's correct. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, committee. This is Sonia Wise. So this is an update report for Rethink Zoning, which is the project to create the city's new comprehensive zoning bylaw that will eventually replace our existing zoning bylaw Z1. This is a very large project which will span many years and will create one of the most important implementation tools in achieving the vision and direction of the London Plan. It continues the conversation with Londoners about how they want to see their city grow. This first began with the preparation of the London Plan through the Rethink London engagement process. And Rethink Zoning shifts the question from what type of city do we want to see to how do we get there? Over the past year, background work and research has been undertaken to explore and evaluate the available tools and techniques for zoning, the various regulations that may be used, and also the best practices that could be learned from other municipalities. From the work that has been completed, a series of 5 background papers have been prepared. These papers capture the research and details collected and are based on a variety of subjects such as what is Rethink zoning, zoning for use, intensity, and form, and also an in-depth look at the Ontario municipal case studies. The purpose of the background papers is not only to summarize the work that has been completed so far, but also to provide something tangible for the public and stakeholders to review, consider, and comment on. The papers will form part of the foundation of the project as it moves forward and are posted on the project website and publicly accessible at this time. In terms of next steps for the overall project, the city is currently in the process of selecting a consultant for the next stage. Once a consultant is retained, there will be more detailed work going forward to develop the actual bylaw, as well as more community consultation and engagement opportunities to actively seek feedback and input. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If there are any questions, myself, Mr. Adama, or Mr. Barrett would be happy to take them.
Thank you very much. I think if one of your policy papers was zoning for dummies, I think that would be something that I would certainly be able to use, but it sounds like a good project moving forward, and I'll look for any questions. Councillor Hopkins, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick thank you. I think this is quite interesting, especially a planning committee when we have to deal with a number of zoning issues. And I am looking forward to the opportunity to be part of this conversation and hear what Londoners think as well. We started the London Plan and Rethink with that community engagement, and now we're moving forward with these zoning bylaws. I know there's a number of zoning issues. We deal with them here at planning all the time when it comes to height, intensification, setbacks, lot coverage, and in particular in my ward, infill and intensification is always a big conversation. So I'm really interested to see how we're going to move forward. Glad to hear what we've got in the consultants in place, and looking to see how the community will continue their engagement. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Hillier?
Thank you. Yes. As I'm going through the Rethink zoning, I'm quite excited to see that we'll be rethinking our buffer areas around our ESAs. We'll be doing parking review for business. Coming out of COVID, we are going to need to help everything. The parking reviews will be a big thing along Wellington and also along Hamilton Road for Michael. This is going to be an issue getting businesses off the ground again. So I'm looking forward to see what the public comes up with and what staff comes back with. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Any further comments? There being none, I just need a mover and seconder for this. Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Anything further? Let's call the vote.
Councillor Hopkins? Closing the vote, motion carries 5-0.
And the next item is item 2.2 between the City of London and UTRCA. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have asked for this to be pulled. I do have a number of questions. As you know, committee members, I do sit on the Upper Thames Conservation Authority Board, and I am wanting to know a little bit more. I want to thank staff for meeting with me and giving me an update. I have not had an opportunity to get an update from Upper Thames as this sort of came to us in the agenda. And I'd like to follow up with maybe a couple comments and a number of questions, if I may, Mr. Chair. So I think it's fair to say that we all want to be efficient and we want to, not duplicate and create opportunities to move our applications forward in a efficient way. I think no matter who you are, be it staff or Upper Thames or the community, we all want to see that. And this is the beginning of that. And with the recommendation coming to us, I have a number of questions as it relates to if I can start with A. This is a draft plan, and I know we are being asked to approve it substantially, and I'm not exactly sure what that means. So if I can start off with that question, so I can have a better understanding how we move forward with the draft MOU that's in front of us.
Okay, so the question is what is the effect of us approving the memorandum of understanding in its form today?
Certainly.
Well, we are
And
approving it substantially and just having a better understanding what that means.
Right. Go ahead, Stan.
And through you, Mr. Chair, it's Matt Felberg speaking. So really the purpose of the language is to highlight that there's still a few edges to round out on this. In a conversation we had with the CA GM last week, they identified a couple of things that they wanted to dig a little deeper on with their teams and their legal department. But they didn't highlight any major objections to what's in front of you. Key takeaway, which we also highlighted to the CA staff, is that the CA still maintains its delegated authority for planning matters under the CA Act. But where we have matters of natural heritage, stormwater management, or hydrogeology that aren't related to hazards, the city would take the lead on those reviews. Essentially, the goal of the DMOU, or the development MOU, that's in this report, is to provide clear direction to staff on who comments and when, in an effort to reduce duplication between the two areas. If through those conversations with the CA as we're moving forward, we establish that there's a significant deviation to what's in front of you today, we'd be bringing it back to council for a further approval.
Thank you. Councillor?
Yeah, thank you for that. It is, for me, it's something I need to understand, wearing my councillor hat, as well as Upper Thames being a member of the board. And we know all CAs are going to be going into new MOU agreements. And we're still waiting for the provincial government to get a better idea what these regulations look like. And I do think we have to understand what we're doing here as we approve these MOUs going forward. So following up on what Mr. Felberg said with the new changes that are being introduced here, and this is a draft, if I can have a better idea how this is going to speed up the process, this new DMOU.
Okay, go ahead. This has to do with speed of approval that will be affected by this.
Certainly, and through you, Mr. Chair. So essentially, with each application, we have both the Upper Thames and the city reviewing matters of natural heritage, stormwater, and hydrogeology. Since 1997, when the original MOU was, or the one that we've been working off was approved, we've added a significant number of ecological staff, and then in addition to hydrogeologists to our resources here at the city. In addition, we have a very robust stormwater engineering group that takes on all matters as they relate to stormwater infrastructure, and which includes also incorporating into the DC background study, as well as our multi-year budget, and improving the infrastructure around the city. So the goal here is to allow the Upper Thames to focus on the things that are part of their core mandate, which would be flood protection and educational awareness, and allow our staff to undertake those reviews as they relate to the things under a Planning Act application within the city boundaries.
Thank you. Councillor?
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate getting that information. I know we have a number of processes that it takes to review. So is the reviewing going to still be the same, but it will be just done by the City of London?
Go ahead, Mr. Felber.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that would be the intention, except for those matters that are delegated by the province. So the typical, the hazard work that they typically do.
Thank you for that. And again, I know we're still waiting for those regulations to have a better understanding where CAs fit into what's mandatory and what's not mandatory. So to me, there's a lot of things still up in the air that we really don't have an understanding. I know there is a number of other concerns that I have, and it's mainly the fact that I have no idea what Upper Thames thinks of this. And I do think it is important when you enter into contracts, you have two parties, and I would like to have a better understanding where Upper Thames Conservation Authority thinks it may work or it may not work. And I think those things are really important for us as a committee to understand this contract that we're substantially approving tonight. So if I'm happy to hear from other committee members, but I would like an opportunity to hear what Upper Thames has to say. And if more work needs to be done, I would like to find out from them what their comments are and how they think it's possible or doable or not. It's important for me to do that. This is a draft, and I know that we're going to be, approving something substantially here tonight, and I still am not quite sure.
Well, perhaps we can ask Mr. Felberg then, is this a draft that has not yet been approved by the Upper Thames? In other words, we haven't had their input on this, so that this is an offer that we're making that they'll either agree with or disagree with, and if they disagree, it'll come back to us to deal with those points of disagreement. Is that how things are going?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. That's basically where we're at today. This is a draft MOU. The next step for the Conservation Authority would be to look at it internally with their folks, so their legal department and their various teams. And then they would take it to their board for a similar approval as we are today with the Planning Committee.
Great.
After that, we would work with them on a transition plan and then execute the MOU, assuming that we could come to some agreement.
Great. I think that answers that point then.
Yeah, that makes it, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's still a lot of work to be done. I know I have brought it to the attention of staff. There are some numbering of clauses in Appendix A under Section 4C. I'm not exactly sure if we're missing certain paragraphs or if the numbering is out of sequence, but I would like to ask the committee if they could support just the referral of it going back with further work to be done with the CA, so we have a better, clear understanding on exactly what this contract is going to look like when it comes back to committee.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear. I think Mr. Felberg said that this is going to the Conservation Authority. They're going to look at it, and if they want to make changes, that'll be up to them to make changes. In other words, that's exactly what's going to happen. It's not a final agreement until the Conservation Authority says, yeah, we agree to this or we don't. So
I know, but I have a request here, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I don't want to. No, I don't want to get in the way of it.
I sit on the board. Eventually, I'll probably get to hear what Upper Thames has to say. But right now, as I approve this MOU, I have no idea what is going on, and if it can even happen in terms of, are they going to be satisfied? Is this? I hear from city staff how they would like to move forward, but this is a contract between two parties, and before I substantially approve something, I would like to have a better understanding of that contract. This is a draft. Having it come back with a better discussion to the committee and eventually to council, I think it is important that we understand.
Okay, Councillor, you've made your point. I'm not trying to get in the way of you making a motion. I was just trying to be helpful in explaining what Mr. Felberg has said. I'm not trying to. So you'll have a chance to make your motion. Let's hear from other committee members. Any other comments on this? Councillor Lehman.
With all due respect, I think we, our other roles in the city, we wear different hats. And when we come to council, we wear the City of London councillor's hat. Our staff has gone down this road with an MOU with Upper Thames. And from what I'm hearing, as this is where they want to go, I can't get into the minds of the Upper Thames. That's for them to respond with our staff as they work through this draft. So I'm satisfied where this stands from my position as a councillor for the City of London, and I'll let Upper Thames deal with this draft at the appropriate time from their point of view.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to be clear through you to staff. Referring this back is actually, from what I've heard, would not do anything. It would actually stall it because the process, if I'm understanding correctly, and this is what I'm looking for clarity on, if I'm understanding correctly, the process now is this draft goes to Upper Thames. Upper Thames can then review it. They can suggest changes. They can object to portions, and that is where they enter into negotiation with staff in terms of what the MOU details are. But if we do not forward this tonight, there's no basis for a discussion to start back and forth. Is that fair to describe the process, Mr. Feldberg?
Mr. Feldberg, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. That is basically where we're at today. What I could offer is we could come back with a verbal update after the conversation has been had with the Conservation Authority.
Well, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I would assume that a verbal update would, or actually perhaps even a written update would return to council once there's a finalized MOU in place between the two parties.
Is that correct, Mr. Feldberg?
Yes, that could be, certainly is something we can do. Although in Clause C, we were looking for delegated authority to the DCM, but we can certainly bring back a report highlighting how the conversations went and what the final MOU was.
Thank you, Mr. Feldberg. Anything further? Okay, Councillor Hopkins, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I would like to make a motion. I think I appreciate my colleagues' comments. I know we have to wear a councillor's hat. I'm wearing my councillor's hat. I'm also wearing my Board of Upper Thames hat. And I'm also wearing my MO hat as well, because this is a big conversation. MOUs, I know this isn't the MOU, this is the DMOU. So we know there are going to be many, many more conversations, but I have concern right now, not understanding if Upper Thames is an agreement or not, or what even that looks like, that I am approving something here substantially. And again, if we are doing that, I think we should have a good idea what these clauses in Appendix A, have a better idea on what we're approving here tonight. And I just received this at the end of last week, and I am not comfortable right now just approving something. So just referring it back, I would encourage staff to continue those conversations. I don't understand how we're stalling things. I know we have staff that are working hard. Our ecologist even at the moment is on maternity leave. So there is time, I think. It's not going to take that long. And maybe through you, Mr. Chair, I can ask Mr. Feldberg, when does he see this coming back with a, with further information and work that is to be done on this DMOU?
Okay, so, and I just want to clarify, because are you assuming we're going to refer it back and when it will come back from the referral? Because if we're not referring it back, it may not come back. If the Upper Thames says this is fine, we'll sign it. So I'm not understanding, what is it if it's referred, I think you should be specifying you want it referred for something. You haven't done that. Can I finish, please? You haven't done that yet. So we understand your point, but we haven't heard your referral yet. You just said to refer it back. So maybe you can specify what you want it referred back for, and then Mr. Felber can say how long that will take.
Just to get some comments from Upper Thames as we approve this DMOU.
Okay, so you want it referred back for further comments from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority before approval? Before we
Yes.
approve it? Yes?
Yes?
Yes, okay, so what the referral is to send it back to staff for comments from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, and then it will be brought back here for further steps, I suppose, which could be approval or not approval. And how long would that take, Mr. Feldenberg?
Thank you, and through the chair, or to the chair. When we spoke with the Conservation Authority on Friday, they were thinking under the current process, it would be probably the end of the summer before they could get through the review, take it to their board, and then get advice from their board on next steps. I think at this point, we're probably looking at least 2 months. And then after that, if it's a referral, and otherwise we could potentially be coming back with a verbal or an update on how the conversation went early in the fall on what's before you today.
All right, thank you. So there's a motion on the floor for referral. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Question before?
Sure, go ahead.
Are we under a timeline here? It says 2 months out. Are we under a timeline that this has to be completed by?
Staff?
And through the chair to the councillor, at this point, there is no timeline for the DMOU. Once the regulation, when the regulations are established, the levy MOU, which is a whole separate document and really speaks to what the city contributes to the Conservation Authority, that work would undertake in advance, I believe, of 2023. But what we need to establish through this DMOU is what the Conservation Authority's role is in Planning Act applications so that it can inform that future conversation.
Councillor, go ahead.
Are we telling them what their role is, or are we working with them to define their role? I'm looking at this. It seems like we're telling them this is what you're going to do, and then they're going to give us their objections and send it back to us. I'm just wondering about that. How involved were they in the creation of this?
Go ahead.
And thank you through the chair. So the template of the DMOU in front of you today came from Conservation Ontario, which was from the Upper Thames Conservation Authority. So they provided us the template of how to create this memorandum. We've been in conversation with them for quite some time on who does what. But at this point, this is kind of the city's position on where we should be taking this based on the resources that we have here at the city and reducing that duplication of effort.
Councillor, go ahead. Are you going to second the motion, or are you no?
Yes, I am going to second the motion.
All right,
Thank you.
the motion is seconded. So we have a motion for referral, and you've heard the wording of it. It's back to staff to receive further comments from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority and report back to us on that subject, those conversations for further action. I'm going to go to the mayor first, Councillor Hopkins. Go ahead, Mr.
I'm sorry, Chair. I'll wait till the question is called. I didn't have a question on this at this point, and I'm sorry for my delay in coming in.
No problem. Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, just speaking to the motion, Mr. Chair, I would like the word further comments or the word further removed. We haven't heard any comments. That is why I'm referring it.
Councillor, I was trying to help you by drafting your motion. There's no need to say you want the word further removed. I'll remove it right away.
Thank you.
Okay? Because that's what I was trying to do is actually, I was trying to be helpful. So let's take the word further out and then are you still prepared to second that, Councillor Hillier?
Yes, I'm just not seeing the word further in mine. Maybe I just updated my screen. It disappeared.
Yeah, the clerks confirmed it to me, the word further wasn't in the motion. So you know what you've seconded. Okay. So further conversation on the motion for referral. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. Okay, through you, Chair, to staff, I just want to get an idea if, this memorandum draft of understanding goes to Upper Thames and they have concerns with this and want to make changes, would this come back to this committee with those concerns and with those questions? Or if not, maybe I can see where the councillor is going on this. If you could just help me with the process here.
So, yeah, you've heard the question, I think, is would it come back if there were concerns expressed by the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority?
Thank you, through the chair. Based on the recommendations before you, we have a delegation to the DCM of Planning and Economic Development. But if there were concerns from the Conservation Authority, we would be working with them to refine what's in the DMOU that you have in front of you. I'm not sure, perhaps Mr. Barrett wants to add a little bit further. I'll pass it over to him.
Thank you to the chair. I think it's probably helpful just to give a little bit of context. As Mr. Fehlberg indicated, this goes back all the way to 1997. And it was put together, and maybe memorandum of understanding is just a bit of an unfortunate term, given that there is an official memorandum of understanding that is required to establish a relationship in the levies between the city and the conservation authorities. And as Mr. Fehlberg said, that's not what this is. This goes back to 1997, and it was to help, and it deals only with planning application matters. And it was to help clarify the roles of the city and the Conservation Authority when it came to providing comments and understanding the input on applications, Plan Act applications. The original Memorandum of Understanding actually asked the Upper Thames to provide a lot of this assistance on the city's behalf because we did not have that expertise in-house. We did not have an ecologist. We didn't have the hydrogeology specialties in the house that we have. We didn't have the stormwater management specializations that we have in-house at that time. And so we relied very heavily on the technical advice of the Upper Thames. In the original memorandum back in 1997 is when the city first actually committed to the UTRCA to hire an ecologist in-house so that we would begin to be able to provide this advice to you as members of council from your own staff rather than relying on the advice from others. As Mr. Fehlberg said, fast forward now, we've been in discussions for a number of years. How this relates to timeliness of response and to make the process run a little bit faster is to essentially establish the lanes. The Upper Thames spends a lot of time and a lot of staff resources commenting on natural heritage matters that in fact they don't need to. We now have that expertise in-house. And it takes away from their ability to comment on those matters that they do have the regulatory and statutory authority, which are the regulatory matters related to floodplain and hazard lands. So what the intent of this was to clarify, again, for the purpose of planning applications, that we would expect and would still rely on their assistance and their technical advice and comments on those hazard and regulatory matters. But we would be able to now handle the advice to you as committee and council as it related to the natural heritage matters. We didn't need to rely on that expertise in the Upper Thames. So quite simply, that's what this is all about, is to try to clarify that. With respect to the referral, I'm not too sure that it's much different from the process that was going to go ahead anyway. What clause A says is, this is the frame of the discussions that we're intending to have with the Upper Thames. We're asking you, council, are you happy with this? Is there anything that you want us to add? Is there anything you'd like us to subtract? And if this is good, this will be the frame of our discussions, and this is the outline of what it is that we intend to put forward with respect to our ongoing relationship as it relates to hearing the input on Planning Act matters. And what it goes on further to say is that is we're asking essentially that it substantially conforms to this. If it's different, we will come back. And we will come back to you and say, well, we thought that in fact it was clear and advisable that they not participate in this, but they feel that they have this role and they want to bring it forward. And that's the kind of thing that we report back to you. And so that was really what this is all about. So there was going to be that ongoing conversation. And I think, as was noted by Councillor Lewis, that's what this process is to do, is to formalize this, to say we now know where our council stands as it relates to how they see this relationship going forward. Now is the time to have that conversation with the Upper Thames, see how the Upper Thames feels about how that relationship goes going forward as it relates to providing that input on the planning application matters. And if everything's fine, then clauses B and C say you're good to go, establish that new agreement. And if it's not good to go, then we would come back and speak to you. If I may, maybe to add that level of assurance would be to put something in clause A or new clause D that would essentially say, if there's something that comes up that seems to be inconsistent with this preliminary direction, that we would come back and report and have that discussion with you. Otherwise, as Mr. Feldberg indicated, if the referral doesn't go through, we would report out to you at the end of the process to say, here's our new MOU, this is where we stand, and this is what's going on. So I just want to provide that background for.
Okay, so just to go back to Councillor Lehman's question. Without adding anything, if Upper Thames has a difference of opinion about this agreement, it would come back to committee. But for extra caution, we could add that to the motion so that it's specifically understood. And I hope I'm not going to get a lengthy answer. Just, is that basically where we are from someone?
Through the chair, if you're asking me, that would be, yes, that's what I was thinking.
Thank you. Mayor Holden.
Thanks, Chair. So I just want to be clear, and again, apologies to you and to the committee for coming in a little bit later. So is the motion, like I see the staff recommendation, and quite frankly, I was extremely comfortable with the staff recommendation to proceed accordingly. But can I just clarify before I make any other comment, brief comment, what the intent is right now? Are we referring it back again?
No, the motion.
And I apologize, because Chair, from the perch I'm in right now, I cannot see the motion, and so I'm going to be relying on your eyes.
Okay, so the motion that was brought and seconded is that the matter will go back to the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, and staff will come back, provide us with their comments, and then there will be a further step, which would be approval or not approval or something like that. In other words, it requires a further step to come back here before approval. If we just leave it as is, that step may not take if the Upper Thames says, yes, we agree with this agreement. So that's the difference.
You know, this, I'm trying to understand what's new or different from even the 1997 MOU. But having said that, Chair, I'm not going to support taking it back again. I'm going to, if this fails, I'm going to proceed with staff recommendation. But we get to a stage of talking, and I thought Mr. Barrett did an excellent job of distinguishing the roles between Upper Thames, and I'm not sure if I'm sensing that this may be fighting for chicken feed or fighting for feed. I don't know. Forgive the analogy, but from where I am, I thought that Mr. Barrett explained it well, and I'm prepared to vote against referring it back and proceeding with the staff recommendation. So just to let you know, thanks.
Do we have further comments on the referral? Councillor Hopkins, go ahead.
Am I to sum up my referral back?
Well, it's committee, so you're speaking. Someone may speak after you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm hoping my colleagues would support it. I do think tonight we are approving something substantially without receiving any comments from Upper Thames Conservation Authority. For me, I would like to know what they think about this before we approve it. I would encourage all of us to do that. I think we all want the same thing here. We want to make the planning application process faster, more efficient, not to duplicate it. But right now, there is time. This is a draft. To understand what the comments from Upper Thames would be is very important to me as a councillor and as a board member. And if they do not agree with something or they have concerns, I would want to know about that before I approve something. So I'm hoping my colleagues will support the referral back. It is a draft. This is a draft that we're speaking to. And it's if it comes back with these comments, I would really appreciate that, because right now I have a number of questions and concerns of this approval that we're going to be doing here tonight.
All right. Any further comments on the referral? All right. I'll call the vote on the referral then.
Chair, without my voting apparatus, I'll vote no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion fails 2-4.
Referral's defeated, so we'll go back. Is someone be prepared to move that? Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Lehman. Comments on the main motion? There being none, we'll call the vote. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's kind of tough sometimes when you're not there in that room. And I would like to just encourage this the committee here. We did hear from staff that if Upper Thames has concerns and is inconsistent with staff's recommendation here, we will, as a committee, not hear of it. And for us, I think that for a planning committee, it's something that is important for us.
Sorry, there's a point of order from Councillor Lewis.
Mr. Chair, but in fairness, that's not what we heard from our staff a few minutes ago. Mr. Barrett confirmed that if there was substantive differences, it would come back to us. Through you, I'm just looking for clarification on that before we go further on this discussion.
Clerk? That's my recollection. I don't know if anyone else. I'm prepared to rule that was what I heard, that they said if there was a major difference of opinion or something they wouldn't agree to, it's going to come back to us anyways. And that is what I heard from staff. Yes, that's correct. Go ahead, Councillor. Just don't, it's not accurate to say that if there were differences of opinion, they wouldn't come back. It will come back.
I would encourage the committee to support the D, just in case it is inconsistent, that it would be reported back to us. So I could see I do not have much support at the committee here. I'll leave it with you. I guess we all interpret things in a different way, and I will not be supporting this motion since I do have a number of unanswered questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? All right, we'll call the vote on the motion.
Chair, I'll vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Closing the vote,
Moving on. The first matter is a public participation meeting for 915 to 919 Commissioners Road East, and I will need a motion to open the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Unless there's something further, I will call the vote.
I'll vote yes, Chair.
Thank you.
zero.
And verbal presentation from staff.
That's correct. Good afternoon, Chair Squire, members of PEC, staff, and members of the audience. Through you, Chair Squire, this is Laurel Davies Snyder, planning in the Economic Services and Supports for item 3.1. It can be found on page 339 of your agenda package. This is a requested amendment to the zoning bylaw for 915 to 919 Commissioners Road East. And pictures of the site and the buildings are on page 341 of your agenda.
Sorry, could I just, there's some sound with your microphone. I think it's too close to you, maybe. It's mic's too close.
I apologize.
That's
is
okay.
That better enough?
That is better, yes, thank you.
Okay, it was too close. Would you like me to start again or just continue?
No, I think you can continue.
Okay, great. Thanks for pointing that out. Just to summarize the application quickly, the applicant requested an amendment to the zoning bylaw to permit a retail store of up to 111 square meters, that's 1,200 square feet, in an existing 4-unit commercial building, which does have other commercial uses, and a reduction of parking requirements to the existing 51 on-site parking spaces. The existing range of permitted uses would continue to apply to the site, and this application does not involve any increase to the size or height of the existing buildings. So they would be adding this retail use strictly to the existing space. So this requested amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement, the official plan, and the London plan. And to note, staff did not receive any public feedback at all for this application. And would you like me to read staff's recommendation?
No, that's fine. I think we're able to read that. Thank you very much.
Great. So that concludes my presentation, and staff are available and happy to answer any questions.
All right.
Thank you.
Is the applicant present?
Mr. Chair, the agent for the applicant, Mr. Allen, is here.
All right, Mr. Allen?
My apologies, Mr. Chair, I was muted there.
That's okay.
MHBC,
Go ahead.
Good afternoon to members of the committee and Mr. Chair. We are acting on behalf of the applicant, and with me today representing the applicant is Mike Jane. He's available to answer questions as well. At this time, I'd like to express our support for the findings and recommendations of the Development Services Report prepared by Ms. Davies Snyder and somewhat presented. In particular, we agree with the findings that the addition of a small-scale retail store permission at this location would be compatible with the existing development context and in keeping with official plan permissions applying to these lands. Also, with respect to the requested parking reduction, we'd like to advise the committee that the existing parking arrangement between Tim Hortons and the Plaza building, the two buildings on site, has operated effectively for several years, and introducing a small retail use into the existing plaza should not result in any sort of appreciable increase in parking demand at this location. Finally, I'd like to thank staff for their attention to this application. Thank you, and we'll gladly answer any questions committee members may have.
All right. Any technical questions only at this time for either the applicant or staff? There being none, we will move on to the members of the public. Are there any members of the public present? No members of, and there's no other members of the public who wish to speak. So I'll be looking for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Lehman. If there's nothing further, I will call the vote.
I'll vote yes, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Closing the vote.
All right, I'll go to Councillor. Yellow hand up for a long time. Go ahead.
I was just going to speak to this just briefly because it is in my ward, and I'm quite happy to see a retail store going into a closed-up sandwich shop. It's just nice. It'll complete that strip mall. There won't be any holes in it.
So I'm assuming you're prepared to move the recommendation?
Yes, I am, very much so. Thank you.
And we'll have someone second it, and then we can have comments. Seconded by Mayor Holder. Comments or questions from the committee? There being none, I will call the question.
I'll vote yes, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Moving on to item 3. Participation meeting with regard to 193 Queens Avenue. And I will need someone to open the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Unless there's something further, I'll call the vote.
I'll vote yes, Chair.
You are a big fan of public participation meetings. I know that, Mayor Holder.
I love them all.
I will assume you're always going to be voting positive.
And I will always say so. Thank you.
There you go.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Staff? Is there a staff presentation?
Ms. Debert, were you two presenting? I noticed you were not muted. You are now muted again. Can one of the managers assist us as to who might be doing the presentation on this
You're
matter?
going to have to help
please?
us out, somebody, and tell us who is speaking to this matter.
Mr. Barrett, could you assist with who's doing the presentation on this?
Can somebody speak?
Ms. Debert, are you presenting on this item? You are unmuted.
We pulled the staff plug. There's one big plug and somebody pulled it. You're making the presentation? You muted all of the staff? That's okay. If you could teach me how to mute all the rest of council, I would love that. Come on, you gotta laugh sometimes.
Ms. Debert, are you presenting on this item?
Yes, I had planned to.
All right, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem.
I may have had a glitch here. I couldn't
Don't
hear
worry
what was
about it.
happening.
We've had a lot of glitches over the term of COVID, so you go ahead.
Thank you. This is Barb Debert. This is an application to apply a new temporary use zone at 193 Queens Avenue. The purpose of the requested amendment is to recognize and allow for the continued operation of the existing surface commercial parking lot on the property for a maximum of 3 years. The property is in the downtown place type of the London plan and is designated downtown in the 1989 official plan as well. The property is also within sub-area 4 of the downtown parking strategy study area, which is identified as having the second highest utilization rate of 81%. The site is also identified as an underutilized site in our Move Forward, London's downtown plan. Through the circulation of this application, some members of the public were concerned that permissions to recognize and allow for the continued operation of the site as a surface commercial parking lot would prevent long-term redevelopment. The 1989 official plan and the London plan both provide criteria to generally inform the review of applications for temporary zones, and more specifically, the review of new or existing temporary zoning to permit surface commercial parking lots in the downtown. Among these criteria are the potential long-term use of the temporary use, the degree to which the temporary use may be frustrating the viability of the intended long-term use of the lands, and the demonstrated need for surface parking in the area surrounding the subject site. Staff is satisfied that these criteria have been met for this application and that the recognition and permission for surface commercial parking for a period of 3 years is appropriate to serve businesses and residents in the downtown until such time as alternative parking and transit options are available. The recommended amendment would not compromise long-term redevelopment, but rather provide an interim use and help meet high parking demand in the area until redevelopment occurs. The use of the site as a surface commercial parking lot has demonstrated a measure of compatibility over time, and as such, staff is satisfied that the recommended amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement and is in conformity with the temporary use policies of the London Plan and the 1989 official plan. It is recommended that the 3-year extension be approved. Thank you, and staff are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is the applicant here?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Allen is here.
Thank you. Mr. Allen?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, again, and members of the committee. Again, Scott Allen from MHBC Planning. We're acting on behalf of the applicant. With me today representing the applicant is Muki Pandaki, and he's available to respond to questions. At this time, we'd like to express our support for the Development Services report presented by Ms. Debert. In particular, we agree with the findings that temporary commercial parking permissions at this location would help maintain convenient access to downtown offices, retailers, venues, and residents in the near term. We also agree that this temporary permission would not undermine the long-term redevelopment potential of these lands or the broader planning objectives for London's downtown. These findings also reflect commentary presented in our planning report, which was submitted in support of this application. Also, Mr. Chair, as noted in the city staff report, we'd like to advise the committee that the applicant is currently exploring development plans for this area that would include this specific property. So to conclude, we'd like to thank staff for their attention to this application, and we're available to answer any questions committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Technical questions only, please, from committee at this time. All right, there aren't any, so we'll move on to public participation. Is there anybody here to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Ms. McKeating is here to speak.
I'm sorry, Ms.
McKeating.
Ms. McKeating. Ms. McKeating, are you present?
I am. Can everyone hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
First of all, I can picture Mayor Holder's smile disappearing because while he might love PPMs, he probably is tired of hearing the ACO, as may the rest of you be, and I do apologize for that.
No, just to be clear, no, that just isn't it. I know Mayor Holder.
I'm saying that jokingly.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah.
I'm absolutely saying that jokingly.
Perfect. Okay.
You know, don't think that I'm doing anything other
Not a
than
problem.
you.
Okay.
And I hope that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, we fully understand that city council cannot tell property owners, within limits what they can and cannot do with their property, and that they can't tell developers what they can and cannot do and where they should build. But city council can, in their decisions, send a message about what they want to have happen on certain blocks of land within the downtown core. And the Farhi organization, they don't only own 193 Queens Ave, but they also own 199 Queens Ave, where a heritage building was demolished 10 or so years ago after Mr. Farhi, with an architect and a really, really lovely rendering of a high-rise building to be developed there, convinced council of the day to allow that demolition because development was imminent. And now we're hearing that development is once more imminent. And I guess that what we would suggest to the PEC and to council is that if you really want development to be imminent here, denying yet another renewal of a temporary parking permit zoning would perhaps incent the owner of the property to really get moving on what at the end of the day will probably be a very, very positive addition to downtown. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any further No, there's no further public participation, so if I could just have a motion to close the public participation meeting, moved by Councillor Lehman. Anything further on that? I'll call the vote.
I'm sorry to have to vote yes because I hate to close the PPM, Chair.
Ah, I knew it. I knew he would try to get the last word on my reference.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
All right. Questions, comments? Go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just put the staff recommendation on the floor, and then if I've got a seconder for that, I'll offer comments.
Seconded by Councillor Lehman. Any questions, or let's start with questions.
Well, since the motion's on the floor, Mr. Chair, I'd actually like to speak to the motion.
Go ahead. Absolutely, you're right.
Okay, thank you. So with respect to this a renewal for 3 years, you know, I think there's, the member of the public who spoke, Ms. Keating, referenced the other properties in the immediate area. There's a city property sandwiched in between, and I would point out to committee members that very recently at Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee, we directed staff to actually keep that item in the core area action plan to come back to us with potential for what might be done there. And there was discussion at that committee about mixed residential, parking, commercial, that kind of thing. There's high utilization in this parking lot. And while surface parking is not the highest and best use of this property, until such time as we have other alternatives for parking for Dundas Place, it's actually a pretty critical spot to be providing parking for the businesses on Dundas Place itself. Businesses that certainly need all the help that they can get right now as we hopefully are moving into a COVID recovery stage. So I'm going to encourage colleagues to support this extension. I certainly am encouraged and hope that the applicant does in fact bring forward a development proposal on this lot. It would be good to see something that is not just surface level parking, but until we have parking elsewhere for Dundas Place available, we need to continue to provide that for the businesses to have a chance to succeed.
Go ahead. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? I have a question. Oh, I had a question, but I didn't see Councillor Hopkins is going to go ahead. So you go ahead. Go ahead, Councillor.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair, but I do have a quick question.
Sure.
Just following up on, is this an extension or is this a new temporary 3-year parking
Staff?
plan?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, this is actually a new temporary use zone.
Okay, maybe just to clarify though, and maybe I can help, how long has this been a parking lot? I've been in downtown a long time. It's been a parking lot, I think, for a long time.
Yes, Mr. Chair, a review of our aerial photography would indicate that it's been a parking lot since 2007.
Thank you. I have a question, and I'll ask it, and if someone wants me to get out of the chair to ask it, or I'll do it. But this is to the applicant, and just preface this by a lot of people are asking the questions that are being asked by the ACO tonight, which is, you know, that we've heard a lot of this before, and the parking lots keep coming back. So when I'm reading your justification report, it says, the site is being considered for future redevelopment opportunities, and Fari Holdings Corporation will advance project planning for these lands in response to favorable market conditions. And then it says, until such time as there's a comprehensive development plan, it's going to be, you want to continue to operate it as a commercial surface parking lot. So what are we to understand favorable market conditions to mean? In other words, what are the favorable market conditions that would lead you to develop this property?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll briefly respond since it was my report. That statement was had some generic nature to it, but certainly in discussions with Fari Holdings, this site is identified as one that's being closely targeted for redevelopment considerations. And to Councillor Lewis's point, this property was part of the proposal that Fari Holdings Corporation had put together in response to the city's request for qualifications for the 185 Queens Avenue proposal. And that is mentioned as well in my planning report. And without getting into specifics, certainly that the request for qualifications, that was a serious application by Fari Holdings and their project team, and similar types of development considerations are being evaluated now. And in my apologies if that language was somewhat generic in my report.
No, that's fine. You clarified what you meant by that, and that helped build on what Councillor Lewis said. So I thank you very much for that. Any other questions? Councillor Hopkins?
It's not so much a question, Mr. Chair. I just want to make my comments.
Sure,
and
go ahead.
I appreciate the report from staff. Reading the report speaks to the importance of this area being a critical spot for development, and it also speaks to the importance of it being a high area for parking as well. And I would like to encourage the developer to develop here. This is a place where development can occur. It's also important to note this is already a commercial parking lot. By not supporting a new 3-year parking lot, it will still stay as a parking lot, I assume, if no development goes forward. So I would not support the recommendation supporting development in this area, and setting that tone, I think, is really important. We need development downtown, and I will not be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments? Councillor Lehman?
Thank you. I understand the frustration with the surface parking lots, and many folks want to see development get going here. It's a tough thing is it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. If we want to see a downtown thrive, as we can see from the numbers in the report, in this area, 90% utilization is considered a maximum practical occupancy, and zones 3 and 4 are at 89 and 81 respectively, which may make it difficult for visitors to conveniently find parking in these areas. And we want to see Dundas Street thrive, and we've put a lot of resources into getting that street going. And parking, as mentioned in this report, is critical to that. We had spoken before and other times about a possible parking garage, but until such a facility exists, we can't risk sending a message at the expense of the businesses along Dundas Street in the surrounding area. So I'm hoping that development continues, but I'd also like to see the city explore the option of a parking garage, which at which point would take the parking resources off, and then we could consider cutting back on these temporary permits.
Thank you. Further comments? Okay, I'm just going to make some comments. Could I turn the chair over to the vice chair, please?
I have the chair. Go ahead, Councillor Squire.
Thank you. I think it's time that in terms of the debate about parking lots, that we start as a council and as a committee, start setting some parameters as to when we're going to approve continuation of parking lots and when we're not. And I think we're getting into a discussion and starting to get into discussion where those of us who might approve the continuation of parking lots are being people that are not wanting these sites to be developed. And then if you don't want to extend it, you're discouraging parking. I think that's not a great argument to be having. I think we should look at the actual criteria that we're applying and see if they are met in particular cases. So from now on, certainly I'm going to be looking at each case and saying, does this meet the requirements? And if someone comes to us and says, well, I want to continue this temporary parking lot because I just haven't really thought about redeveloping it, that's not going to be good enough, certainly for me. In this particular case, there's a couple of things. First of all, it is a high-use parking lot. We know that I think the percentage was 85% use, and that tells me that it's probably being used for people who are working in offices and don't otherwise have parking available, and on other occasions, people who are actually coming downtown. So it has a valid continuing use for now as a parking lot. I'm also very conscious of the fact that there was an application related to these lands as part of the comprehensive parking strategy downtown. And it was not the applicant who discontinued that. It was actually us who discontinued that. We actually took it off the table, at least for on a temporary basis, I think until this fall. Staff wanted to take it off permanently. So I don't think you can say there's no desire to develop or an actual application went in to do something with this land. So I'm satisfied right now this meets the criteria, but I would encourage everyone moving forward that we really look at these matters carefully and decide which ones we're going to approve in what circumstances. So those are my comments. Thank you very much, Vice Chair.
I'll return the chair back to you, Councillor Squire.
No further comments. I'll call the vote. That's my first mistake of the evening. I'll have you know, Councillor Lehman.
Chair, as much as you never make mistakes in my eyes, I will vote yes.
Now he's.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-1.
3.3, which is a public participation meeting related to 1810, 1820, 1840, and 1850 Adelaide Street North. So we'll have to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Lehman. Anything further? There not being anything further, I'll call the vote.
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Thanks.
Closing the vote, the motion carries.
All right, looking for a staff presentation.
Good afternoon. This is Justin Adamo, Manager of Long Range Planning and Research. Before I get into my presentation, I'd just like to acknowledge Joanne Lee, who's on the line, and she's the planner on my team who prepared the report, and she provided me these notes for the presentation. So this application is to an existing commercial site at the southeast corner of Adelaide Street North and Sunningdale Road East. It will facilitate the expansion and completion of the existing commercial plaza there, which is currently partially built and partially occupied. Specifically, the amendment is to add the neighborhood shopping area 4 zone, which will broaden the range of commercial uses and also increase the maximum floor area from 4,000 square meters to 6,000 square meters. And this would allow for the proposed development, which comes in at 5,104 square meters. There's also a proposal in the zoning to add a special policy, which would permit an individual use up to 952 square meters, whereas 500 square meters is the current maximum for any commercial use other than a grocery store. This application, or this site rather, is within the neighborhood commercial node of the 1989 official plan and within the shopping area place type of the London plan. In our view, and based on our analysis, the proposal conforms with the policies of both plans, specifically looking to the shopping area in the London plan. In our view, this is a consistent development with the long-term vision for that place type. It's also consistent with the provincial policy statement, and on that basis, the staff recommendation is to approve this application.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant present?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the agent, Mr. Kirkness, is in attendance.
Mr. Kirkness. Are you there, Mr. Kirkness?
Sorry, Mr. Chair and committee members, it's Laverne Kirkness, and
Welcome.
I have with me Ali Soufan and Carl Ramirez from York Developments. But we thank you for looking at this application. We thank the staff for bringing forth a supportive recommendation, and we would ask that you adopt it and recommend it to council. I just want to say that this is probably the single largest commercial center in the Stony Brook Uplands area at Adelaide and Sunningdale. Not counting Masonville, of course, but up in those communities, this is the largest site. And it was zoned way back in 2000, and I guess it's difficult to foresee, but we kind of think, at least in our experience, it was kind of underzoned in the beginning. And we've been trying to make the best of it. We've had to go to committee of adjustment a few times for minor variances. We had a couple of site plan amendments. And it's probably frustrating for the community because they keep getting these notices. It's frustrating for staff because we keep tinkering with the zoning, matching it up with the marketplace. And of course, it's frustrating for us too. But this zoning amendment really deals with the last piece to allow this commercial center to develop and gives us a zoning to do that, to kind of clean up all that. So we've been kind of working with staff to certainly bring this application forth to increase the amount of commercial square footage and to allow a one larger store than what was normally intended in the old zoning. So with that, I think what this does is recognize the site for what it's worth, and that is it's an important community commercial center serving Uplands and Stony Creek, Stony Brook, even Grenfell, and those kind of communities. And so we're hoping that the planning committee looks favorably upon this, and certainly if there are any questions of a planning nature, I can try and answer any specific questions. Then Ali and Carlos are here to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any technical questions for either staff or the applicant? There being none, we'll go to the public. Are there any public members present? No.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any members of the public. However, I do have someone joined us with the initials HP, and I have no idea what item they might be here for. Could I allow them in to make sure it's not this item?
Of course.
Whoever has joined us with the initials HP, you can now speak. Could you please identify yourself and what item you are here for?
We tried. All right, so I just need a motion to close the public participation meeting, moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Lewis. There's nothing.
I'll vote yes, Chair.
Consistency is important, Mr. Mayor.
I hope so.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
All right, I'll turn it over to the. Is someone prepared to move the staff recommendation? Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Mayor Holder. Any questions or comments? There being none. Oh, go ahead, Mayor Holder.
Well, thanks very much, Chair. I seconded this motion because I'm quite comfortable supporting the staff recommendation to proceed. First, it's consistent, as has been mentioned, with the policy statement. It's consistent with the enforced policies of the 1989 official plan. And I think, to me, and I'm just going to steal words right from the report in terms of providing the appropriate intensity for the site and providing, if I might say, a service that I think is necessary for the community in that area. So for all of those reasons, I'm prepared to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Then I'll just call the vote.
Chair, I'll vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
4 is a public participation meeting with regard to 1146 to 1156 Baseline Road. I will need someone to move opening the public participation meeting, moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Lewis. If there's nothing further, I will call the vote.
Not to surprise you, Chair, I'll vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Do we have a staff presentation? I think we do.
We do, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Melanie Vivian, the site development planner on this file. So I have prepared a slide. It does begin at page 441 of your agenda.
Okay, if you could just give us a second.
Yep, no problem.
441. Sorry, on which agenda is that? On the added agenda, sorry.
Yep, on the electronic one.
Thank you. All right. I hope everyone has that. It's on the added agenda at 4:41, and you can begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the proposed development here is located 1146 to 1156 Byron Baseline Road, which is west of Colonel Talbot Road and east of Bowler Road. As shown on page 442, the proposed development consists of one stacked back-to-back townhouse block and one two-story townhouse block consisting of a total of 28 units. I'm moving on to slide 443 there. The stacked back-to-back townhouses are proposed to be 12 meters in height, with a two-story townhouse proposed at 7 meters in height. So those stacked back-to-back townhouses meet the regulations of the zoning bylaw, whereas the two-story townhouses are actually proposed to be less height than what was previously approved at 8 meters. And then on to the page 444 there. The site was rezoned last year to permit the cluster townhouse dwellings at a density of 52 units per hectare. So the current proposal is below the maximum permitted density of the zoning bylaw. The parking on site is provided at a rate of 1.5 spaces per unit, which also complies with the regulations of the zoning bylaw. 3 visitor parking spaces are also being provided, which meets the intent of the site plan control bylaw in that regard. In terms of lot coverage, the applicant is proposing lot coverage of 22%, which is well below the permitted maximum lot coverage, and a landscape open space of 54%, which is above the minimum requirement. And I'm on to page 445 now. The council resolution from last year's rezoning included direction to the site plan approval authority for enhanced boundary landscaping along the east, west, and south property boundaries, a deep well waste storage system outside of the easement, the building orientation towards Byron Baseline Road, the parking lot design, including landscape islands and generous separation between the parking lot and that easterly property line, and adequately sized amenity area, as well as the retention of as many trees on site as possible. And I'm on to page 446 there for those of you following along. So through the site plan application approval process, we received 10 comments from the public with respect to this application, and concerns have been raised for the privacy, landscaping, lighting from the parking area, garbage collection and storage. There was parking concerns, as well as the impacts on the services within the area due to the increased density. One of the more prominent matters that we've been working with the members of the public and the applicant as well is the landscaping. So there's currently 57 trees on site. Only 7 of those trees are proposed to be removed to accommodate the proposed development. As identified on the landscaping plan as shown on the slide there on page 446, there's a mix of 41 trees and 314 new plantings proposed. The proposed landscaping along the east, west, and south property boundaries exceed those planting requirements of the site plan control bylaw. And the landscaping that's in place there also provides for the screening and privacy qualities. It is worth noting that there is a row of cedars along the back property line that is proposed to be retained, with additional landscaping being provided to help fill in any gaps that are existing. Staff are of the opinion that the proposed plan satisfies council's resolution. I am happy to go into any more detail, answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant present?
Yes, I am. Carla Barani.
Thank you. If you'd like to make a presentation, you don't have to. You go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Well, I wasn't prepared to make a presentation,
You don't
but
have
to. Yeah, we're very excited about this project and, the construction of the homes. We think it'll add, value to the community. And if any of the, anybody from the public has any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you very much. I didn't want to put you on the spot. Thank
That's
you.
all right.
Any technical questions for either the applicant or staff before we go to the public? This is a site plan meeting, so it'll be concerns from the public. Mayor Holder.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify with staff that this application from Brownie Homes did not get support the last time, if I'm understanding correctly. But what are the primary differences from the last effort to put this forward and where we are today? If my understanding that is correct, please.
Go ahead, staff.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The original proposal on the site was for an apartment building, and that was back in 2018, 2019, if my memory serves correct there. The apartment building was appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal, where it was subsequently refused there as well. So the applicant then came back with this townhouse development, which was approved by council just last year through that rezoning process.
Thank you. Any further technical? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, for me, no, I appreciate the clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any technical questions from other members of council, or the committee, I should say? Councillor Lehman?
Through you to staff, I just want to be clear that it's mentioned that this did pass the urban design review panel. Would just to make 100% sure it's this particular design, not the one that was appealed. Is that correct?
Go ahead, staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. So this would have gone to the urban design peer review panel through the previous zoning bylaw amendment application, and this was the one that was heard.
Thank you. All right, if there's no further technical questions, we'll go to members of the public for comment.
Through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Thurston is
She keeps
here.
calling me Mr. Mayor, Mayor Holder. I don't
Sorry,
know.
Mr. Chair. My apologies, Mr. Mayor and Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
you don't need to apologize for that.
He is worthy in many ways, Chair. He is worthy in many ways.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. Thurston is in attendance.
All right, Mr. Thurston?
Hi, this is Crystal, his wife.
Okay.
Greg sends his regrets.
Okay, so it's Kristen Thurston?
Crystal.
Crystal, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And you?
He didn't want me to pass anything on. He put his name down just in case he had a question if anything else was raised. But I think our concerns are well recorded, well documented.
Okay.
In many spots. So I don't have anything to add.
Okay, is there a question that you wanted to ask? Because we can get it answered.
No, not
Oh,
right
okay.
now.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. McLay is in attendance.
Mr. McLean?
Mr. McLay, you are unmuted. You can go ahead.
Mr. McLean? Oh, there you are. Mr.
Okay,
McLean?
sorry. Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, and your first name?
John.
John McLean.
McLean.
Okay, so you have 5 minutes to tell us your concerns or whatever you wish to say, and your time starts now.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak. In the document, it does reference the public input in multiple cases, and that's very reassuring that our voices have been heard. So thank you for that. I do have 2 questions. There's reference in the document to a development agreement, and I would like to understand more about that. Who was the agreement between, and how does it get enforced after the site is complete? And then there is additional comment that I have a question around 104 trees to enhance hedging, and I apologize, I'm sure I'm not getting the precise wording. I'd like to understand how that success measure is rated, because the objective of that is to enhance privacy. How is that graded? That because it's not just planting 104 trees to enhance the hedging. How do we know that that was successful?
Okay, we'll get those answered for you. Anything else? Is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, that's all.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining us tonight. There's no other members of the public present, so I just need a motion to close the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Call the vote.
Oh, yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
All right, I just 2 questions. The first is, what is the development agreement? Who is it between? And I guess, how is it enforced and what the purpose of it is? And maybe staff could help with that.
Yes, for sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question relating to the development agreement. So the development agreement is going to be registered on title. It will include a number of clauses that are standard, as well as special provisions. So I guess I'll kind of touch on your second question there as well, in terms of the hedging and how we know if it's going to last to provide those green quality. So there will be a clause within that development agreement requiring the 2-year inspection for those landscaping components. And it will also include the replacement of them should any of them fail to thrive in that environment. So that will be added to the DA. So as I mentioned, that development agreement will be registered on title. It will include a number of clauses, special provisions. It will also include the stamped and approved plans. So essentially what is built will look like the plans that are provided there. So the development agreement is registered on title, like I said. It's between the city and the applicant. So it'll be us and Barani Homes.
And how is it enforced if it isn't complied with by the developer? I think that was one of the questions.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for reminding me of that one. So they are obligated by securities. So through the development agreement, we will collect securities through that process.
All right. So they put up security, and if they don't comply with the agreement, the city would take that security.
That's correct. Yep. So they have to comply with the agreement and the approved plans before we can release securities, and that's done through our inspection process.
Great. And just with regard to the 104 trees, I think the issue is how would you know if that had been successful in providing hedging or privacy for the site? How would that be judged, I think was the question.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can touch on that more as well. So through that development agreement, we would have a clause stating that after 2 years, they would have to go out, do the inspections. If there were any impacts or any trees or hedging that wasn't surviving, it would have to be replaced. And that's included within that development agreement to ensure that that is completed.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I just want to get those taken care of, and I'll turn the matter over to the committee. Councillor Hillier.
Yes, I'm looking at the map here. I'm just curious, what is the closest these 3-story units are to the neighboring houses? I'm seeing some pools, and I'm wondering which, I know the trees are not coming down, but trees do come down. What is the approximation to the neighboring properties of the 3-story unit?
Go ahead, staff, or the applicant, if whoever can answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm just trying to open my plan really quick here. There we go. So the setback there is 6 meters from the 3-story townhouses, and that would be to the property to the west, and that meets the regulations of the zoning bylaw.
Councilor?
Just 6 meters just seems fairly close for 3+ stories. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chair, I've got a couple questions, and then if I may, maybe through you to staff, just following up, confirming that there is a hydrogeological report there is still on this application a holding provision, because there is a well to the west of this property, and I have heard from that neighbor the concerns, because they are going to be keeping their well. I want to make sure that that holding provision is still there, and the opportunities for the owner to get a hold of the hydrogeological report as well would be my first question. And the second question relates to the lighting. I know a big concern with this infill development was the importance of privacy and the lighting around. Do we know where we are with the site plan at the moment when it comes to lighting? 2 questions for you.
Go ahead. Yep, go ahead, Scott.
Hi, thank you. It's Michael Pease, Manager of Site Plans. I can answer the first question with respect to the hydrogeological. There is, and through you, Mr. Chair, there is a holding provision, as alluded to. It's still on site. The hydrogeological report has been accepted by staff, but the holding will remain. Likely it'll come off at a future Planning Environment Committee meeting, along with potentially the holding provision for this H5. So we would provide a bit of a summary in that report as to how it would be addressed, but effectively there are some recommendations which could make their way into the development agreement as well in terms of monitoring and acceptance. I believe you had a question as well about the residents being able to obtain a copy of that. And if I do recall, I believe they've been in touch with Ms. Vivian. And if there are any, I believe they've been also provided direction to report or to request that through our staff. And if they are having challenges, certainly they could follow up with us at our general email address or through Ms. Vivian, as well as I believe they do have her email address. I will let Ms. Vivian follow up with the lighting question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. As it pertains to the lighting, we are still currently reviewing the photometric plan to make sure that the impacts to abutting properties are none or very minimum. So I don't have a solid photometric plan at this time. We are still reviewing that.
Thank you. And if I may ask one last question.
Go ahead.
For you, Mr. Chair, to the planner regarding the tree preservation plan. I think my hearing's going off maybe tonight, but I want to confirm that we are keeping the 50 trees, 7 are being removed, and that only 41 trees are being planted along with 314 new plantings. I want to make sure the public that's come out tonight and that may be listening understands the tree preservation plan and what's expected.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yes, for sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. So that is correct. There's 57 trees currently on site. Only 7 of those are being removed. So basically 12% of trees on site are being removed. They're planting 41 new trees of various sizes and types along the property boundaries and internal to the site. And then as well as that, they're planting the, just lost my number there. They're planting 104 trees to be planted as the hedges to help provide those greening qualities. So they are adding 314 new plantings on site. So that includes the trees being planted, the trees being retained, as well as other shrubberies.
Thank you for that. I know privacy was a very important conversation in the community with this infill development. And I really, if I may, Mr. Chair, just make my comments now. I know this is a site plan participation meeting where staff are going to be taking these comments and taking them into account as they continue the site plan application. And this was a very big concern in the community, this development. And I want to thank the builder for sort of facilitating an open house and having that conversation with the community a few months ago to further answer the concerns in the community. And I want to thank the builder for that. It's important to the community, given that the changes that are about to happen. The tree preservation plan is quite full. I really support the tree preservation plan as well as the deep well storage system that will be going in and the amenity space as well. These were things coming out of the last planning committee to make sure that these would be addressed through the site plan application. So I'm really glad to see that. I know some more work still needs to be done around the snow storage, how that's going to look like, if it will be kept on the property or if it will be removed. Those conversations are going to continue. So I just want to thank the public for coming out and for the builder to continue working and addressing the concerns in the community. And with that, those are my comments.
All right. Perhaps I should get someone to move the recommendation at this point. If someone's prepared to do that, Councillor Hopkins is prepared to do that, seconded by Councillor Lewis. So we'll now be commenting on that motion. Councillor Hillier.
Thank you. Yes, I'm just looking at the map and I'm curious about parking. It says there's parking for 3 visitor cars, and then I'm looking at the roads around it. We've got Byron Baseline Road. You can't park on that road. And Griffith around the corner is a fairly busy one. Where would overflow parking be? There's only 3 for 28 units.
Staff, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So under the site plan control bylaw, we only require 1 visitor space for every 10 units. So they do meet the standards of the site plan control bylaw. Any other parking that happens off-site, it would be a bylaw enforcement issue if they're parked illegally.
Well, I see that coming forward.
I'm sorry?
I say I see that problem going forward with this.
All right, thanks. Any further comments or questions? All right, we have the staff recommendation moved and seconded, so I will call the vote.
Chair, I'll vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
The next, we're moving on to items for direction, I'm sorry. Item 4.1 is a request for delegation status with regard to 183 and 197 Ann Street. Just for the help of the committee, this was a matter that was referred by council to a future meeting to determine, I think, both the application and the heritage status. However, we have two delegations tonight. First is Ms. Velastro has asked to speak to the committee, and also York Developments has also now requested delegation status. So we have two requests for delegation status. Normally, as the committee knows, we refer them to the next meeting of the committee, but I'm in committee's hands. Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our clerks, perhaps, on this one. Given that a prior committee has already referred both the planning application and the heritage consideration on this to come back together at a future date, and that has not happened yet, is it procedurally in order for us to be hearing delegations on a matter that's already been referred to a future meeting? Or would it be procedurally appropriate to refer these to the meeting when the application comes back? Because with a previous direction from committee, I just feel like we would need reconsideration to change that situation.
Clerk? I'll look for your advice on this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, either one would be procedurally appropriate. You're certainly free to hear the delegation, and we'll refer that information to when the staff reports come forward, or you can refer it to the meeting when the staff reports come forward. Either way, I'm just looking at the recommendation with respect to this. And A part was the comments received from the public be received.
There's another one too.
And that development services staff be directed to take the necessary arrangements to hold a public participation meeting regarding this. That was from March 24th, 2020. And on November 24th, 2020, the motion was with respect to the application for 183 and 197 Ann was that a clause from the Latch report will be referred to civic administration. The resource known as 197 Ann Street be designated. And this is the motion from Latch, correct? Actually, maybe I'll let Ms. Lozinski respond because she's more familiar with this file as to what happened with the November 2020 resolution.
I think what we're looking clarity on is first of all, were both matters referred by council ultimately to one meeting, both the planning application and the heritage designation? In other words, are they both referred to the same meeting? And then following on that, if the delegation tonight is regard to making that a determination on heritage status tonight, which I think it may be, is that appropriate? So that's, I think there's two issues there. Am I right, Councillor Lewis, or am I? I do have a recollection of the council discussion being about whether we would send both matters to be determined together. Maybe I'm wrong, but.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yes, you can refer, both the Heritage Latch recommendation and the staff, planning application were referred back to staff.
So I think then that leads to the next matter. Can we make a decision on one of those matters separately tonight, or is council already decided that they're going to come back together? The clerk maybe could tell. I think that's what Councillor Lewis is getting at.
Through Mr. Chair, you can certainly hear the delegations. I would not recommend you make a decision until you've heard both matters together. But you can certainly hear the delegations. We will record it as part of the record. And those comments would be considered when staff is reporting back on both, or you can refer everything to when those reports come back.
So if the people making the delegation would have to understand that there will be no decision tonight, but their delegation would be referred to that meeting, or they can just, subject to what they want to do, they could just say, well, we'll make those delegations at the meeting when it comes back to planning. Those are our two avenues, I take it. Councillor Lewis, does that help? I can advise the delegates of that, and maybe that may influence their opinion.
Having heard that response, Mr. Chair, I'm certainly willing to give you the leeway to advise the delegates of that. I'll tell you that it is my intention, after you advise the delegates of that we refer these both to the future meeting to come back with the staff report. Respectfully, I don't think that we should be dealing with these in bits and pieces. I think we should be dealing with them comprehensively when both the staff report on the heritage and the planning development application come forward together.
Need to say anything then if you're gonna bring that motion. That may just determine it at an end. So go ahead, and if you want to make a motion, and we'll see if you have a seconder, and then I'll invite the other members of the committee to speak to that issue.
Okay, so with respect, Mr. Chair, I am going to make that motion that this item, both these delegation requests be referred to a future meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee to coincide with the staff report coming back on the matter as already referred to council. We'll look to see if there's a seconder on that, and then I'd just offer one more comment after that.
All right, I see Councillor Hillier's prepared to second that. All right, so that motion is on the floor, and just so the people who are delegates are understanding, it's not to receive your delegation, it's merely to refer those delegations to the meeting, the planning meeting where both matters have been ordered or by council to be heard together. So that's already been decided by council. So go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the reason behind this is very simple. This wasn't an item on our agenda tonight from staff. This came from a public request from an individual, essentially asking us to make a decision tonight, which would not be appropriate in my view. But beyond that, because it wasn't on our agenda as a staff report, no other members of the public are here to give their thoughts because there isn't a staff report yet. And I am concerned that we would be really setting a precedent to start hearing delegations on planning matters anytime somebody didn't agree necessarily with how a development was proceeding before the staff report has come to us. And staff reports do provide an opportunity. You know, we've just gone through a number of public participation meetings tonight. There's an appropriate time for delegations to come and share their concerns with us, but I think that it needs to be dealt with in a comprehensive manner with the staff report, and that's why I think tonight it's best to refer this to that future meeting.
Okay, further comments on the motions, which would include comments on the delegations, obviously, or Mayor Holder.
Well, Chair, you've rightly indicated earlier that there probably isn't a public participation meeting I have not supported, but I'm moved by the comments of both the clerk and Councillor Lewis with respect to right place, right time, and I'm mindful of chewing our food twice, and therefore I'm prepared to either second or support support the direction that this go to the appropriate.
The wind is getting in the way of those last few words.
And my hair too, Chair.
No, I was not going to. I would never comment on your hair, but we can't hear you clearly. So,
Let me try this again then, and briefly. Typically, I would support PPMs, as you indicated, because I think the more input we have from the community, especially when we've got two sides of the argument, I think, and I'm not sure it's of the argument, but of this issue certainly being put forward. But I think Councillor Lewis makes some great points, and I'm prepared to support and second his motion to refer this at the appropriate time with the staff report.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Sorry, Councillor Hopkins, did you? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, to the motion on the floor, I would like just some clarification here. I've got a couple questions. I understand there's 2 delegation requests here. Question number 1,
yes.
If they are both present tonight to do the delegation request.
Well, I'm assuming they are. I haven't spoken to them yet. Are both the delegates here? Yes. So it's Ms. Velastro who initially made the delegation, and she provided the substance of that delegation. And then York Developments, in response, has requested delegation status, and they provided a letter which is on the agenda. So far, the clerk has advised me as chair that we should not be making a decision on one matter and not both, because council specifically directed that they both be heard together. So it would be inappropriate for us to now try to make a decision on one. So either way, even if the delegations will be heard, it's just a matter of whether they're heard tonight or at that actual meeting where decisions are made. That's where we are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question number 2. We can just receive the delegations. We do not have to make any decisions here. That's my understanding of delegation requests. It's not imperative that we make decisions. And question number 3, will there be a public participation meeting when this application comes back to planning?
Yeah, so with regard to the second question, you're quite right. We could hear them tonight, just hear them and refer them, the substance of them, to the meeting. It's just Councillor Lewis has indicated, I think he thinks the better approach is to hear them at the actual meeting. When this matter comes back to planning, will there be an actual public participation meeting, or is it just a meeting where you would get delegation status?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would depend on how different the recommendation is, or the application is, from what was originally at the public participation meeting. Normally, I would recommend to planning staff, if it's a length of time, that likely they should have another public participation meeting, but I haven't seen the report. Perhaps planning staff could help with that.
Yeah, maybe I might ask staff, because I think the council raises a good point as to whether we will actually be having a public participation meeting when this matter returns. And I don't even know if they can give us an idea when it's returning.
Mr. Chair, it's Michael Tomazintik speaking here, and we were anticipating a revised application to be submitted by the applicant, and in fact, we're still anticipating that. It just hasn't materialized yet, but as soon as we do and we review the application, we certainly will bring it back for a public participation meeting.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Tomazintik. Very, very helpful. So it seems to me, and not to assume anything, that the people are going to have the right to speak when this matter comes back, whether they're doing it as delegates or members of the public. So it's sort of the same situation, but I'm sorry, Councillor Hopkins, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification. That really is helpful to me. For me, I am quite comfortable receiving both delegations tonight. If they're here, all we're doing is receiving their comments. There'll be further opportunities to make comments when this application comes back to us. So I won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Further comments on the motion? Go ahead, Councillor Lehman.
My understanding is that in a PPM, people have one chance to speak. Is that correct, Clerk, on a proposal before committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, at the public participation meeting, they only speak once. They can certainly submit communication subsequent to that before council makes a decision as well. But at the meeting itself, it's only once.
So my concern here is that we're circumventing that idea. Everyone gets one chance to speak. I understand the delegation here would like to speak, and then I'm assuming the delegation could speak again at a future PPM, and I don't think that's right. I think it should be a fair process where everyone plays under the same rules. So I think it's more appropriate to have this delegation heard at the appropriate time.
Anything further on the motion of Councillor Lewis? There being nothing, I will call the vote, and that's to refer the delegations to the future public participation meeting on both matters.
Chair, I'll vote yes.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-1.
Item is item 4.2, which is the fifth report of the advisory environment. And if you look at that report, there is a request from the committee that the municipal council make a request of the government of Ontario to place an interim cap on greenhouse gases and some other issues. And staff has made a request that this matter be referred back to them to determine how it aligns with our climate emergency action plan and report back. But I should mention that this was referred by a prior Planning and Environment Committee for the same thing on November 30th of 2020. So I think before we refer it back again, we will hear from staff. And I don't know whether Mr. Stanford is here or someone else to speak on it. I think they were aware we were going to be dealing with this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, Jay Stanford is here tonight to address any comments. But as you indicated, this came before PEC last November. At that time, it was put on the deferred matters list with the understanding that it was going to refer to the Climate Emergency Action Plan, which it still sits. In May, there was an update to the deferred matters, and it actually came off your list. And at that time, it was indicated that the Independent Electricity System Operators Organization, which is an independent group in Ontario, had launched a consultation process regarding what do we do with the future of natural gas in this province. That consultation process is underway right now, and it is a comprehensive one. It is an Ontario-wide process. The city will be participating in webinars to learn more, and upcoming responses will be provided to that particular process. So there's actually a couple things underway right now. So Mr. Chair, if I may, that being just redirected back to staff would be, in our opinion, the appropriate place, because that's where it currently sits right now.
Thank you very much. And I can confirm, Mr. Stanford, you're right most of the time. And in this case, you are. I was able to confirm today that that's quite correct. There's a report being prepared by this independent energy body to come back on just this. So I think that's at least accurate. So what we're looking at, and that's the reason that we're referring it to staff, but I'm gonna turn it over to council and see if that's the appropriate course of, or committee, to see if that's the appropriate step you wish to take. Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think it's absolutely the appropriate step to take. And I would tell you that you're a little bit wrong, only insofar respectfully that
We're not hearing you, Mr. Chair. Or Mr. Mayor, we're having some challenge hearing you. I know you've been thrown out of your home. It's tough for you, but we're hoping to hear you.
Can you hear me a little bit better now, Chair?
We can, and I'm pulling your leg,
okay.
Of course.
Well, with due respect to the Chair, firstly, I support what Mr. Stanford has said. And I would also say that you're somewhat wrong, but you're never wrong, insofar as I think that Mr. Stanford always gives solid, strong advice on issues around climate change and the environment, and I totally appreciate his contribution to our city for what he's doing. There's my broad comment.
See, so he's complimented both me, and now he's complimenting you, Mr. Stanford, so he's in good form tonight. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Stanford, for being here. I know when this was sent back, we never know at planning what happens to it, and now it's back again and we're referring it. So I do appreciate your comments, and the consultation process that's going on is really, really important. So I'm glad to hear staff is going to be part of those webinars, and hopefully coming back to us with the report. Is there a timeline that we can expect this next report coming back, or do we know, and where will it be going? I know it's not going to be coming back to planning, but if we can have a better understanding of the process when it comes to our climate change emergency action plan.
All right, so are you asking when the emergency action plan will be coming back, or this particular?
Yeah, just confirming it's going back on the list, and then when can we expect, and what committee can we expect the climate emergency action plan going to?
Okay, Mr. Stanford.
Thank you, and through the chair, it is our understanding at this point in time, it'll be coming back to SPPC. And the rationale for that is that our two previous reports have gone that particular route. Before any final decision is made on that matter, though, we will be consulting with the city clerk to make sure it does land with the most appropriate committee, but that is our current intention, but that could be subject to change. For a date, it will be later this fall, 2021, as per our recent report. But if anything comes up on this particular consultation that's out there right now, we would come forward earlier on a single matter. But our preference is always to bring forward a very comprehensive look at a variety of options to make sure that council has all the information before a decision is made.
All right.
If I may, I just want to thank Mr. Sanford for that information. I know the public is interested in where this goes. The consultation process, one more question. How long is that going to continue for?
Mr. Stanford, do you have any idea of that?
According to the timeline on the website, it will go into the fall as well. What we don't know will be, it's going to be a very technical undertaking. It might lead actually into a number of different phases. And if that's the case, then we will bring back information on where we sit in that phase. As you've heard, dealing with any fossil fuel, in particular natural gas, is paramount to the future of Ontario for climate change. But it is equally important too that we're looking at it from an economical perspective, an economy perspective, and of course, the whole grid is based on a variety of energy sources right now, when we have to make sure as the future goes forward, we hear from the experts of how that grid will maintain the economy here in Ontario.
All right. Anything further? So do we have anything prepared to refer 2.1 back to staff? All right. We're going to get that up, and then we will receive the rest of the report. All right. We get that up, and I'll just need someone to move and second it. Mayor Holder. Oh, no, we can't. You might be on mute. There we go.
You move that, Chair.
Seconded by Councillor Lewis. So it's moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Lewis, and it should be, where are we going to see this? Is it up? All right. So it's any further comments on where we're referring the one matter back, and okay. And I'll call the vote.
Appropriate to vote yes there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Next matter is item report of the London Advisory Committee on Heritage. Just unless somebody has any questions, I just need to motion to receive and file that report. Moved by Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Lehman. Any comments? And I'll call the vote.
I'll vote yes, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Vote, the motion carries 6-0.
There are no business, so I just need a motion for adjournment. Oh, that's on the added list. I'm sorry. My apologies. This is my second mistake of the night. Please keep track. Thought I was going to get out of here with one. So we just need someone to move receipt and filing of the 5th report of the Environmental and Ecological Planning Advisory Committee. Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Mayor Holder. If there's nothing further, I will call the vote.
I'll vote yes, Chair. Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6.
Motion for adjournment. We're going to do this by hand. Moved by Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. All in favor, raise your hands. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Great meeting. Everyone take care. We will see you at SPPC on Wednesday.
Great job, Chair, Mayor.